Hi, this is Goichi. How are you? Welcome to the Doorway to the Word. Today's doorway is to Master and Apprentice, the discipleship. Well, discipleship is a very important part of Christian life. And we have to remember, we do not walk alone with God as a Christian. God designed us to walk with others from the beginning. You see, God said to Adam, well, it is not good for you to be alone, so I'm going to make you a partner. That's why God made a woman. See, God never designed us to walk alone. God never wanted us to be a lone ranger. You see, and one of this collective walk is a discipleship, the master and apprentice. And there are many examples in the Bible about this master and apprentice. And we're going to have a look at about three distinctive examples of this master and apprenticeship. And we're going to find out how it could be done and how important it is. And hopefully this is a doorway to find out God's heart about discipleship. Well, first example is a man called Joshua who followed Moses. You know the story about Moses and Joshua. You can read that in the book of Exodus and the book of Joshua. And this is interesting. This is the apprentice found the master. See, Joshua. Well, first appearance of Joshua in the Bible is in Exodus chapter 17, verse 9 till 14. And they were having a battle against Amalekite in the wilderness. And Joshua was leading the troops while Moses was interceding by lifting his hand up on the top of the mountains. And while Moses was lifting his hands to God, interceding, Israelites are winning. But his hands are coming down. Israelites are retreating, you see. So, these troops were led by Joshua. And the Bible tells us in the book of Numbers and all, that Joshua was one of the leaders of the 12 tribes, namely the tribe of Ephraim. Well, you know the story about those 12 spies that Moses sent to the land of Canaan. And he was one of them. And he says that those are the leaders of the tribes. Interesting that Joshua's name, the original name is called Hosea. But Moses called him Joshua, you see. And there are a lot of theories you can read. You can find out on the internet and all the commentaries. I leave that to you. But anyway, Joshua was a mighty warrior. And he was a gifted leader. So that's what Joshua was. But not only that. Interesting thing is that his quality is much more than being a leader. He was an assistant or aide, some of the book says, to Moses. Basically, he was serving Moses from his youth. You can read that in Numbers 11:28. Said, Joshua, the Moses said, from his youth. See, he was serving Moses. And because of that, Moses treated him a little bit different from the others. When Moses went up to the Mount Sinai to meet with God, to receive the commandment, the 10 Commandments, actually Joshua went with them, while all the elders were told to stay at the bottom of the mountains. Most likely, and when Joshua went up, Bible doesn't tell, but most likely that Joshua was with Moses when Moses was receiving the 10 Commandments. You see, because you can read that and assume in Exodus 33, verse 7 to 11. See, Joshua stayed close to Moses wherever he went and served him. That's interesting, isn't it? And also, Joshua was a man of God. He had heart for God. What can we tell? How can we tell? Well, Exodus 33, verse 11 says, Then Moses would return to the camp from the tent of the meeting, after meeting with God, But his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. So obviously Joshua went into the tent with Moses, witnessing Moses meeting with God in his presence. And after Moses came out, finished the business, finished the meeting, came out, Joshua stayed there because he was so hungry for God's presence. There are also Numbers 32 verse 12. They, that Joshua and Caleb, followed the Lord wholeheartedly. That's why God commended them to entering into the promised land for only 2 from the first generation, you see. So he was man after God's heart too. And even more interesting things, commission as a successor of Moses, you see. God instructed Moses to anoint Joshua. You can read in Numbers 27, Deuteronomy 3. God told Moses, Joshua will succeed you as a leader of whole Israel. And Moses commissioned Joshua as a successor in public so that everybody would know. And not only that, after that, God called Joshua and commissioned himself. In Deuteronomy 31, and also Joshua chapter 1, you can read God is commissioning and encouraging Joshua as a leader of the nation. So what can we find out? Well, Joshua was a gifted leader. He had a gift of leadership, but also he was a servant to his master. He served Moses while he watched him and learned from him. And he had heart of God. He did not know he was going to be a successor of Moses. He did not know he's going to be leading Israelites until it happened. You see, it wasn't his ambition or goal. He simply respected and honored and served Moses because he saw this great man in front of him, the man who is a friend of God, in God's presence, and God talks to him face to face. And I believe that Joshua was so excited, and he was so impressed that Moses, and I think he wanted to be like Moses, so close to God. That's why he honored Moses and served him. And with that servant heart and heart of God, God chose him as the next leader. He's a man who found the master, the role model. What can we learn from him? Well, I tell you, all those young people, the young Christians, find someone you can look up to, you can learn from. In Japan, there's a saying that the man who teaches people with his back. What does it mean? Well, it means this man doesn't teach people directly, but with his actions, he teaches people. And Moses has been like that to Joshua, you see. So, those people who are mature Christians, you may be someone's role model without you knowing. So, be aware of what you do to your behavior. And when you find someone, mentor them. So, this Joshua, the man who followed Moses, the apprentice, found master. You see, it's one of this discipleship way. Imitate, Paul says, imitate me. Imitate someone who you think or whom you decide your role model would be. See, so that's Joshua. Well, second example of this master and apprentice discipleship is Elisha. Elisha, who followed Elijah. This is a little bit different situation from Joshua. Interesting. God gave the master the apprentice to mentor. You see, God told Elijah to find Elisha to be his successor. See, call of Elisha. as I said, in 1 Kings 19 verse 16, you can read a story of how God told Elijah to find Elisha and anoint him and mentor him as his successor. So Elijah went and found Elisha and called him to follow him. Well, Elisha was from wealthy farming family. How can we tell? Because the Bible tells us he was farming with 12 yokes with 12 oxen. See, that's big, and it tells us he was from wealthy family. Remember this, wealthy farming family, when he was called. But when Elijah came, Elisha decided to follow Elijah. It means he had to live his comfortable life, and that includes his families and friends. You see, interesting though, Elisha asked Elijah if he could say goodbye to his family, and Elijah said, just, well, if that's the case, he turned away and walked away. You know, it sounds really harsh, isn't it? But I think that's Elijah telling Elisha, by his action, telling Elisha how costly this ministry is. You know, it's interesting. When Jesus came and called disciples in a similar situation, they had to leave their livelihood, whether fisherman or whatever. And Jesus himself actually said in Luke 14 that they count the cost if you're going to follow me seriously. And so did Elisha. He counted the cost, burned his yoke, and sacrificed oxen, made a meal out of it, and said goodbye to family, and followed Elijah as God's planned. So there's a cost to follow the God's purpose, the following Jesus. See? So Elisha was called, started following Elijah. What did he do while he was following Elijah? He was serving. He was serving masters. You know, in the Bible, it tells us he washed Elijah's hands. It means he was serving. You see, in everything daily life, in everything it happens in the daily life. Elijah was a servant to Elisha while he was mentored and learning from the master. And it went on for many years. You know, some theories says 6 years, 10 years, 8 years, you know. But in many years, he was a servant to Elijah. And when it came to the end, when Elijah was just about to die, he asked something. Elijah asked Elisha, what can I do for you for the last time, because I'm going to die soon? And the interesting thing said, Elisha, he said, give me a double portion. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit, focus a little bit about this double portion bit. You know, sometimes I wondered what the double portion means, what Elisha was asking. And then often the people said, oh, he wanted to, you know, double the power and double the anointing of Elijah had as his apprentice, you see. And actually, that's what happened. He received double anointing, the double spirit of Elijah, it says in the Bible. And he did more miracles and a longer ministry than Elijah. And, you know, it could be that the Elisha received the Elijah's anointing. The plus, Elisha himself had anointing from God. That's why it's double portion, you know. But when I looked at this, it's much more than that. There's a goodness of God coming from this story. So Elijah asked, what can I do for you for the last time? And then Elisha said, give me double portion of your spirit. give me double portion. It's very significant in their customs for the Jews. The double portion of inheritance means by the law of Moses. In the law of Moses, double portion of inheritance was given only to the first son, the heir of the family. And by Elisha, by saying, give me the double portion, he's actually saying, consider me as your son. The modern apprentice, consider me as your son. Imagine, Elisha has been with Elijah for many years, serving, watching him. And then they had a probably good conversation, good talks, helping each other, etc., etc. And Elisha's respect for Elijah must have grown. And at the end, Elisha asked Elijah, double portion. Actually saying, consider me as your son. In other words, I love you as my father. Remember, Elisha left his family to follow Elijah. In a way, he lost his family. And for Elijah, as far as we know, according to the Bible, he did not have any family, not a son. Elijah told Elisha, if you see me going up, if you stay until the end, I give you the double portion you requested for. And so Elisha did, witnessed him, went up. How could I say this? That he was talking about, asking asking Elijah to consider him as a son. Because later in a chapter, when Elijah was taken up to the heaven on a chariot, Elisha shouted, my father, my father. You see, they developed much more than a master and apprentice relationship. Their relationship became more like spiritual father and son. And Elisha asked Elijah to consider him as his son, because I consider you as my father. You see, Elisha left his family for God's purpose by following Elijah. At the end, God restored her, giving him back the family, the spiritual father, in the form of spiritual father to Elisha. And Elijah, he did not have a son, as far as we can find out. He finally, at the end, received the son that he never had. Maybe he was craving for it, but his life was consumed in God's purpose, you see. And God is so good there. God gave them more than what they lost. And that's what Jesus said. Jesus said, if you leave your family, father and mother, son and daughter, for my sake, it will be restored, rewarded in this life. You see? And that's why it happened even years before Jesus said that. So, Elisha and Elijah, as I said, their relationship grew much more than master and apprenticeship. And that often happens when you disciple someone, or you are discipled by someone. Discipleship is not only for the programs or method, it's about the lifestyle. And God works through this discipleship to bring about much more than that. God's chosen path for Elisha was costly, as I said. It's family, the social status and wealth, etc. Those are the costs that Elisha had to pay. But he sought after God's purpose first and followed the master that God gave him. He served his master for many years as if he was a servant and not an apprentice or successor even. But God at the end rewarded him and rewarded his faithfulness and servant heart with launching him into his calling as a prophet and gave him double portion of anointing to change the society and gave him the spiritual father, the family he has lost. You see, from this we can learn the count the cost and seek first God's kingdom, and everything will add to it. The plan of God for us is good. Remember this, whatever happens. In Jeremiah 29, in the book of Jeremiah, it talks about that. I have plans for you, and plans not to harm you, but plans for the future, the plans for good. You see? And then when you are called to be disciple of someone, keep the servant heart until the end. And God will launch you into your calling. Until then, serve. And if you do, God will bless you much more than it costed you. This is the thing. See, the ones you are discipling and the ones who are discipling you, maybe for much more than discipleship relationship. So stick with each other. Stick with each other, serve and love each other. And when you count the cost, God will reward you much more than at the end. So that's what we can learn from Elisha and Elijah discipleship. That God gave master the apprentice to mentor.